Welcome to First Bite, the Pride of Detroit preview podcast. We are now previewing. I guess it's not even previewing anymore since we are in the off season officially. My name is Jeremy Reisman. I am the co-host of First Bite. With me, as always, is Ryan Matthews. Ryan, how we doing tonight?
I was just about to say I was wet because I'm getting out of the shower.
Oh, wow. Okay.
POD After Dark, everybody.
It's going to be that kind of episode, huh?
Right out of the gate.
Yeah, so in the case this is the first time listening to our midweek podcast, for the past couple weeks, we have been talking about GM candidates, coaching candidates, and we've had a special guest with us each time that has a little more background on that person than we do. This week, or at least one of these episodes this week, spoiler, we're going to have more than one, George Paton is the topic at hand. He is the current assistant general manager with the Minnesota Vikings. So with us, we brought back our good friend Arif Hasan from the Athletic Minnesota. Arif, welcome back, buddy.
Hey man, how's it going? Love the mustache, dude.
Thank you. It's very aggressive, and it probably is not long for this life.
Yeah, it's bold. I think bold is the word I would have.
Yeah.
He's so full of it. Here's the thing, Arif, is that we have crowdsourced this mustache.
Yeah.
On Twitch, people have been upping the ante and meeting Jeremy's demands that we have to have so many subscriptions.
I'm holding a hostage.
He's holding everybody hostage.
Yes,
with
absolutely.
It's incredible.
I know. It's awesome, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
The mustache is cooler than he is.
That's just
No
completely unnecessary. Let's get to George Paton because we want to get in out here, get Arif on his way because, he held me hostage on his podcast to talk about the Lions Week 17 game. I'm going to hold him hostage a little bit here, talk about a guy that maybe not a ton of people know anything about because, he's behind the scenes. I don't believe he's probably ever talked to the media, so might make it kind of hard on you to talk about him a little bit, but we need to talk about him, I think, because they interviewed him today, Thursday, and the interesting note of that interview is that it was in person, and it was the first external candidate that had an in-person interview, and Rod Wood, the team president, said specifically that they were going to hold off on in-person interviews until they get to finalists. So ipso facto, this guy might be a finalist, and so
must be serious.
Let's talk about him, and I guess we'll just start with the very basic. Arif, what do you know about him?
Okay, so I see also already in the chat people I don't know much about him. I'm excited to learn about him, and I'm going to disappoint all of you. He's so remarkably private that it's actually very difficult to get very much information on him at all. Which credit to him. I don't want to say that's a problem, but he doesn't make himself available to the media. A lot of people have tried to kind of reach out, and he declines to do pieces on him or let people get to know him. So it's actually very difficult to know kind of who he is and what he does within the organization, which is very unfortunate. But I already told Jeremy beforehand that this was going to be I don't know very much about him, but I am going to try and talk as much as I can about the way the Vikings have built the organization to see if maybe that's a good way to understand how the Lions might approach the thing if they do hire George Paton. But one note, I think, is that he's been very, very selective about, which organizations, even that he'll interview with, but even organizations that he interviews with, he's been selective about whether or not he wants to join those organizations. So from that, I think we can learn a couple of things. The first is that he's extremely well regarded because he's been sought out for interviews for years now and has turned down multiple organizations. And so some of them have reached out to him and he completed the interview process. And then later he tells them that he's not interested. I don't know if they offered him the job and he told them no, or if he told them no beforehand. But he has been in the final round a number of times. For the Jets, he actually declined to interview at all. He was just not interested in interviewing with them. And so my understanding is that a lot of this is not just driven by how important the fit is to him, whether or not he thinks the organization's a good fit for him. And I think that that's an important consideration, but also how it will affect his family. And I think that his family plays a big role in whether or not he's going to take an interview with a particular team. And I think that, stuff like, how old his children are, which I don't know, actually. Again, he's very private. But, for example, if his children are in college, it's probably a lot easier for him to move across the country and take a job than if his children are still in school, right?
Yeah.
But, that I think plays a role. And then kind of, he's constantly in discussions with his wife about whether or not, a particular city or a team would be a good fit for him. And so I think the very fact that he took an interview with the Lions, and in particular had an in-person interview, was indicated to be one of the finalists, is probably a pretty good sign that he is interested in the Lions just as much as the Lions are interested in him. So that I think is pretty important. But also, again, I do want to say it seems like he's extremely well regarded in these circles. I mean, he comes up again and again and again.
Interesting. And yeah, I'm glad you're going to give us some insight into the Vikings process, because I think the main thing that the only thing that we know for sure about him is that he's tied to the hip of Rick Spielman. He has been for his entire career, going back to his days in Chicago and Miami in their personnel departments. So, now he's been with the Vikings for 14 years. I think since 2012 he's been the assistant GM. Mm-hmm. So basically it seems like whatever philosophy he has, it's probably pretty closely associated with Rick Spielman. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah, for sure. So he gets, as far as I know, he gets involved in helping design the process that the Vikings use and help integrate the various aspects of their personnel department. He is not the director of college scouting. That's Jamal Stevenson. He's not the director of pro scouting. I wish I remembered the name of that person, but that's a different person as well. He's not the director of analytics. That's a former scout that they promoted to that position. But instead, he stands kind of above all of those different departments and helps kind of unite the organization's goals and assist Spielman in executing Spielman's philosophy. So he and Spielman very likely have very similar philosophies when it comes to approaching roster building.
That's interesting you mentioned that, Arif, because I think the one thing that Lions fans are most interested in learning about is like his scouting acumen, like particularly how it like relates to how ambitious the Vikings have been recently in terms of their drafts. I mean, even like we saw last year, and we joked about this with you on numerous podcasts, but the Vikings just had a whole boatload of draft picks. Like, how tuned in do you think he is at that level he's in? Because I think it's a level that the Lions are really interested in getting somebody who has quote unquote GM experience. And if he's not necessarily the director of pro scouting and not the director of college scouting, but he's at this tier where he's tied to the hip with Rick Spielman, does it seem like he's ready to take the step to be a GM?
Yeah, no, for sure. So I think that the idea originally was that he would be kind of the next successor in line for Spielman.
Oh, okay.
The Vikings like him a lot too. It's not just that he's tied to the hip of Spielman; it's that they really appreciate him a lot as well. So I think that a lot of it just has to do with kind of the security that he has within the Vikings organization and how much the Wilfs have in terms of regard for him. I think that's why it's so easy for him to say to other teams that he's not interested in taking this interview or that interview or anything like that. So that I think is part of it. I think that a lot of teams and the Vikings also think that he is ready to take the role of a general manager, and he's been exposed to every facet of general managing, as it were. And so it's not like he is a salary cap expert who only has experience with that, like Mike Tannenbaum, and then kind of gets promoted to that, or he's not just a director of college scouting like Joe. I'm only thinking of Jets guys now, like Joe Douglas, and he gets promoted. He has dipped his finger essentially into every element of personnel that a front office would, and then he's helped kind of coordinate that to help kind of move the Vikings forward along the philosophy that they want. So he's very familiar with the analytics side. He's very familiar with the cap management side. He's very familiar with the scouting side. He has experience, watching film and doing the kind of the shoe leather scouting, going out and actually going to different colleges and talking to coaches and stuff like that. And he also has experience being in a room with a bunch of scouts and kind of debating over, kind of where prospects should be ranked and stuff like that. So in terms of just kind of the broad range of assignments and responsibilities a general manager has, he has that. Which is to say, not every general manager needs to have that, some kind of lean on delegation and stuff like that. The 49ers GM, Lynch, I always forget the first name, John Lynch, right? Hall of Famer? I should know him.
Yeah.
But finalist this year is not a Hall of Fame.
Oh yeah, that's right. He's not actually in the Hall of Fame. Well, rip. I don't think he's getting in this time.
No, he's not.
but he doesn't have any experience in any element of that, and they're a really well run office. So delegation and management is a bigger part of the role than just kind of being familiar with every department. But he does have that experience, and I imagine that's just an asset.
Well, just a quick follow up to that, Arif, is with him being viewed as a potential successor for Spielman, is there some kind of like clock that's ticking on Spielman as being the GM?
Maybe, I don't know.
No,
So I mean, like, so Spielman and Zimmer seem to be tied at the hip at the moment. The Wolves a couple years ago synced up the contract lengths, which is a pretty good signal that they kind of view the two as kind of, if one fails, the other fails, sort of thing. And when they extended the two of them, the last two times they extended them for identical contract years, and so the two of them are kind of tied together. So, for example, next year, if the Vikings fail to make the playoffs again, there's maybe a strong chance that the Wolves will consider letting go of Zimmer, and that likely means also letting go of Spielman. That does not necessarily mean overhauling the entire process, and it could mean promoting George Paton up internally from within, which is something that seems to be in the cards were that to be the case. So I wouldn't say that there's a clock on Spielman or anything like that, but it is like good to have backup plans.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that you mentioned like delegation and all that stuff, and maybe I'm misconstruing it, but it seems like maybe he has a little bit of experience delegating too, being the assistant general manager. You said he's kind of responsible for coordinating all the departments together a little bit. Isn't that kind of essentially what he might be doing in Detroit if the Lions?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and kind of one of the biggest differences that he'd have from his current kind of projected role based off of kind of inference that we're trying to figure out everything that he's done with the Vikings,
right.
And the role of the general manager is that you have to be proactive and creative in designing your vision and trying to determine what the team does. And if he's picking up on the Spielman philosophy, there's actually going to be a lot of collaboration between him and the head coach, because Spielman has changed what he looks for in a player directly as a result of the feedback from the coaches. And so what the Vikings, look for in free agency and the draft has changed over the years, depending on the coaching staff that they have. And it's very clear that whatever they look for in a player reflects kind of the conversations that they have with the coach. So, for example, with Leslie Frazier, they looked for cover two players, right? That was a very clear part of what Leslie Frazier was doing defensively as part of the scheme. But also, Frazier put a little bit more emphasis on things like character, right? Over some other things, or the ability to generate chemistry and team fit. There was actually kind of a really funny pattern that emerged in Frazier drafts, where Spielman would continue to draft players from the same school. And so nearly everybody that was drafted in a particular year had somebody else from the same school drafted to the Vikings that year, which was very weird, but it became pretty predictable. And that was because Frazier thought it was easier for rookies to acclimate to the NFL if there was somebody that they knew that was going through the same process as them.
Interesting.
And so, that was a big part of it. Now, Zimmer comes in, and, they're not running the cover two stuff anymore. And Zimmer likes to have, defensive ends of a certain size to be a particular type of explosiveness. He likes to have cornerbacks of a certain size. Those things were not priorities for Frazier in the way that he ran his defense. And it turns out all of the metrics that they used to kind of take a look at players, those changed pretty dramatically as a result of the conversations that they had with coaches. The same thing happened on the offense. So with Jeff Davidson, the offensive line coach, under Childress and kind of the continued offense coordinators that they had, Bevel and Musgrave and so on, they needed to have offensive linemen that were comfortable running a variety of run blocking schemes, because Davidson ran a very complex, very multiple run blocking system that included man, power, gap, etc., as well as wide zone and inside zone. And so they needed the players that were capable of executing all of those. Well, after they changed the offensive line coach to Rick Dennison, and also the previous offensive line coach, when they switched to essentially a wide zone scheme, they decided to go towards a direction that would generate much more athletic offensive linemen and de-emphasize things like size. And so they look specifically for, wide zone fits. And so that was very clearly a response to the coaches that they had and the philosophies that they were looking for. I mean, if Peyton is going to crib from a lot of the philosophies that Spielman has used, it's going to be always a collaborative process every year with the coaches. And one thing Spielman did is that at the end of every year, he'd sit down with the coaching staff, the entire coaching staff, and say, here's kind of where we succeeded, here's kind of where we failed. Do we want to kind of update what we're looking for in a player in order to kind of accommodate any changes that you need to make to the roster? And so sometimes they would say, we overemphasized speed in the past. We were a little bit too concerned with making sure that we had fast wide receivers, and we didn't do, well enough in jump ball situations, or we didn't do well enough looking for good route runners or something like that. So let's de-emphasize that a little bit and make sure that we emphasize some of these other traits. And they would kind of adjust every single year based off these conversations that they would have with coaches at the end of every year. And here's the really important thing. They also made sure that scouts were in these meetings as well. And so when scouts, went out into colleges and stuff like that, after they got kind of the list from Blesto of kind of who to keep an eye on and stuff like that, the scouts would know when they got into colleges that, hey, this is a great player. He's not really a good fit for our system, so we're not going to spend a bunch of extra energy and resources scouting this player, knowing that he's going to go in the second or third round. And for us, he'd be useful to us, but not at that investment level, maybe at a fifth, sixth round pick. So we're going to write up a small scouting report. We're not going to invest a ton of resources into him. He's a 2-gap player. We're looking for 1-gap players, or, something like that. Yeah. And so that would be a part of the process that the Vikings front office would engage in. So I would imagine that is likely to continue, even though it takes up a lot of a general manager's time.
That's interesting. I mean, you hit on a ton of buzzwords, I think there that Chris Spielman, and we'll get to his role in all this probably after the break. But yeah, I like collaboration, adjustability, communication. All those things are things that the Lions are looking for, and I think that makes Paton an interesting candidate. You got one more question, Ryan, before we head to a break?
Yeah, just a quick one. I think that can kind of be tied into what Arif has already touched on. And I know you gave the disclaimer that it's tough to talk about Paton just because he is somewhat reserved, and he's very private, keeps himself, and it's unfair to as Lions fans, it's unfair for us to say like all of the bad decisions the Vikings have made are Rick Spielman's and all the good ones are George Paton's, right? So but just
let's say it. Why not?
Yeah, let's say it.
Okay, it happened. Yeah.
Just a draft related question. How aggressive has Spielman been in drafting when it comes to draft day trades and things of that nature?
Extremely. He might be the most trade-friendly GM out there, honestly. So you mentioned kind of earlier at the beginning, and I didn't actually touch on it. So one thing that Spielman always really wants to get, unless, there's going to be a roster glut, so that's only really happened once, is to get around 10 draft picks in a class. Last year, they got 15. It was hell on me personally. But a lot of years they get between 9 and 11. There's only one year where I think they had like 8 or 7. We asked him, he was just like, yeah, we've got too many young guys on the roster already. So it wouldn't have made a ton of sense to get 10. But he's kind of the opinion, and the analytics community kind of agrees with him, that it's probably better to just take a lot of shots rather than it is to be overly certain about your evaluation and take a couple of shots and invest all your resources into 1 or 2 guys instead of 4 or 5 guys that you think might be able to make the roster. So he's traded down really aggressively. And I think every single year that I've looked at it, he's traded down in the 3rd round, whether it is to trade completely out of the 3rd round or to trade just down a couple of spots in the 3rd round to gain additional 4th rounders. I think the only time that the Vikings picked even near the top of the 3rd round was to pick Danielle Hunter, which, that worked out pretty well. So yeah, it's not bad. But yeah, and it really feels like sometimes this leads to missed opportunities. I think that the Vikings didn't get the running back they wanted when they drafted Jerick McKinnon. Like 4 other running backs went. In the 5th round when they traded down a lot, I think they didn't get the kick returner they wanted. A number of returners went right after they traded, and they ended up drafting KJ Osborne, which did not work out very well for the Vikings. But for the most part, they've been to acquire a lot of late round talent, which has resulted in actual gains on the field. I don't think they would have been able to get Tyler Conklin, who's playing really well for the Vikings right now. I don't think they would have been able to get Olabisi Johnson, who is vastly outperforming what you'd expect a 7th round pick to perform. He may not make the roster next year, but I think that he's doing a lot better than you'd expect 7th rounders to do. And then Armin Watts is a player that they're really high on. Again, I don't think they'd be able to do that if they didn't have the luxury of extra late round picks. So that's something that they're very happy to do. And then on occasion, they will aggressively trade up. They did that for Cordell Patterson. Obviously, didn't work out. The best kick returner in NFL history, but I don't think that's what they were looking for when they drafted him. And they traded up to get Teddy Bridgewater. They were really concerned about that 5th-year option. Again, without that injury, it's difficult to fully evaluate what's happening there. Sure. Panthers are probably going to look to replace him, so who knows. But that is something that they're kind of willing to do. Spielman does do that. But he looks for arbitrage opportunities all the time. I think the best examples of that are when he traded down one spot with the Browns in 2 separate drafts to get the player that he wanted, but also just to grab like an extra 5th or 4th round pick. Like, so the Browns really wanted Trent Richardson. They were worried that the Vikings would not draft Richardson, but would sell the pick to somebody else who would draft him. So they traded down one spot, and the Vikings still got Matt Khalil, which, his rookie year, that worked out pretty well. And then the Justin Gilbert, Anthony Barr draft, where they traded down one spot with the Browns. Again, the Browns thought that the Vikings wouldn't necessarily draft Justin Gilbert, but would sell the pick to somebody who would. And so they traded down and got Anthony Barr. So he's looking for all kinds of individual edges in these trades, and sometimes it works out really, I think, really, really well. And they're really aggressive about trying to get a ton of picks. They don't like trading away future picks. They do like trading for future picks. So that's something to probably keep in mind as well. And then they tend to get people who are more athletic at their particular draft slot and position than a lot of teams. And so that's something to keep in mind as well. This is not like a hard rule or anything like that, but they tend to like athletes a little bit more. I think that has a lot to do with Zimmer and less to do with necessarily the specific philosophy of Spielman, but he has mentioned many times that there are athletic cutoffs and thresholds that come to them both from the coaches and from their analytics department about the kinds of players that they should be looking for. And so, cornerbacks, for example, they need to run a fast flying 20. But the length of the cornerback, that's more of a kind of a Zimmer thing, but that's something that they put into their cutoffs as well. So that's all part of it. I mean, it's a fairly analytics friendly front office, but it's not, driven completely by, the spreadsheets and the numbers.
Well, it's sure to make our friend Kentley Platty happy to know if that ends up being the guy. With that, let's take our break. When we come back, we are going to mention the elephant in the room being Chris Spielman and his relationship with the Vikings organization, and we'll talk a little bit more about the philosophy of the Vikings over there and what it means for the Lions GM candidate George Paton. We'll be right back on First Bite. Okay, let's answer some questions in chat really quick. DZ over on YouTube asked why y'all think they're not interviewing Brian Daboll. I have a theory, and this is just a theory. They've really been talking about leadership as something that they're looking for in both GM and head coaching jobs, and maybe valuing personality and ability to work with others over accomplishments. Maybe not over accomplishments, but more so than they have in the past. Daboll, he's in the booth during game days. Like he's not that rah-rah coach on the sidelines. He's not the guy, I don't think necessarily that's, I don't know, that has like very close player relationships. And this is me speculating a little bit, but I don't know. When you're in the booth, it seems to me like maybe you're more of the X's and O's guys, and I don't think that's what the Lions are necessarily looking for in a head coach right now. But I respect the man. I wouldn't mind.
No, they're looking for
a hell of an offense.
Yeah.
They're looking for Marvin Lewis.
I mean, maybe they are. We're going to talk more about that in a couple hours. But yeah, that's my theory. I do think, and I mean, ideally you're finding a mix of the two, right? Like someone that does know the X's and O's of the game and has kind of a creative mind and all that, but can also manage a team. And yeah, there are 2 podcasts tonight. Spoiler alert: Marvin Lewis at 7 p.m. Is Ryan getting even wetter hearing this? Asked Zach Snyder. Is that true?
No, I've dried off considerably.
Oh. All right, not a fan. Not a fan of Arif then. Jeez, wow.
Oh,
yeah,
no,
I'm better, man. I'm sorry.
I tweeted about how handsome he was.
All I'm getting in the Twitch chat is how shiny my head is.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of that and a lot of that I didn't use shampoo today. Okay, well.
What? Is that a compliment, Arif, or no?
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know how to
this,
take
is that
it.
better,
Like,
guys?
I'm not like hurt to the core or anything, so I guess it can't be too bad of an insult. But yeah, it might be a compliment. Hey,
we have like all the bases covered though. Like Jeremy's just full of hair. Arif has none, and I got a hat on. I don't know if
you're rocking the Tim Pool. Yeah.
By the way, Zach Snyder, thank you for the 8-month subscription. Appreciate that. And Ryan06EMU, thank you for the follow. Appreciate that. And Brett Higgins over on YouTube with the follow. Appreciate that as well. Would hiring Paton push the Lions more towards Bevel and Lewis rather than Saleh? That's an interesting question. Should we save that one for the actual The actual show?
Yeah, yeah.
Let's
Let's save that one for the show.
We'll
I
save
don't
it.
know that I'll have a ton of insight either way.
Salah has leadership and is good with the X's and O's. I think he's probably the closest you can get to walking that line, and that's why I think he's been the favorite for a while, and I probably still is the favorite.
He's got a shiny head too.
He does have a shiny head, so I mean, you guys might like that, chat.
If the Lions swing and miss on Salah, then they're coming for Arif.
I've already been mistaken for the New Orleans Saints running backs coach. I mean, he's got the shiny head and the black beard, and
I'm gonna have to pull that up right now.
He's not pale, so
yeah, I have to look this up right now.
Yeah, you gotta look it up.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, with the mustache, I guess. I mean, that feels a little reductive. But...
yeah, no, I can totally see it in
Really?
this one.
Oh yeah, nah, I see it.
100%.
What do you think, chat?
Oh man, I didn't even know there were pictures of him clean shaven. Oh, that's not a good look for him. Personally.
No, he kind of does. Look
No, it is not a good look. Jeremy, did you see this picture?
Which one? I can't tell.
I just sent it to you on Slack.
Wow, some of these pictures he looks like rocked up.
That's the one we're looking at right now. I don't know.
Yeah.
This guy looks a lot meaner than Arif.
I mean, you haven't seen me on a bad day. You know,
I was gonna say,
I
maybe
might just go for it. You know,
we just haven't seen Arif's mean streak.
Yeah, don't fumble the ball. Then we'll talk.
I got nothing else for you, Chad. That's the only ones I can find. All right. Anything else in chat before we jump in? I want to make sure I don't forget that one question from YouTube. Can we announce Salah already? Nope. I won't let you.
Oh, you're getting Salah on the pod? That's huge.
Oh, that'd be great. That's never.
Think that'd be a big get? That'd be a big get for us. I would just be like Chris Farley in those SNL episodes, the super awkward interviews. So
the defense is pretty good, huh? Wow. Talk about that.
What was it like to coach in the Super Bowl?
I like you're acting like the what's the media day at Super Bowl where you just have like kids or people from Sci-Fi Network interviewing people.
Arif is so pissed off. Maybe we tapped into his mean streak right now.
I hate Super Bowl media day. I mean, like I pseudo participated at it when they held it in Minneapolis. It was just like a waste of everybody's time. They should have had the pandemic then, so I wouldn't have to go. Sorry.
What was it? Was it Radio Row or Media Day? Which one is worse?
Media Day. Media Row, you can have some fun.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go if you go onto the right radio stations and talk to the right people. Media Day is just it's crowded with people who are not interested in caring about football.
Right. Yeah. Chat wants us to get Jamal Agnew on the show, which if you follow Jamal Agnew on Twitter, not gonna happen thanks to one Alex Reno. Thanks, buddy.
What did Alex do?
Well, hold on. Well, Alex did do something to provoke Jamal Agnew, but he did it back in December.
Twice.
Well, yeah. So he tweeted out and he said, like, "What's the point of Jamal Agnew?" And
okay, yeah, I could see why that would tick him off.
Yeah, that would tick him off, and then Jamal Agnew just started responding to everybody today because he's like, "I got time." He's like, "I'm searching my name on Twitter." So
that's not a good thing that he has time, but yeah, fine, yeah, go for it, dude.
Nope, it's not great. So then Alex decided to double down once he responded to him and was like, "Hey, thanks for the response. Come join us on our podcast and maybe play some Call of Duty with us." And he said no and quote, "Fuck no."
Okay, yeah. I understand his perspective on this one.
I'll be honest. I'm pretty sure last year I reached out to Jamal Agnew personally and asked if he ever wanted to play video games with us on our Twitch channel. So, guess that's
probably
dead now.
the end of that.
Yeah, that's probably not gonna happen. But you know what?
I feel like I've asked what's the point of XY player, and I talked to them afterwards, and they were like, "Yeah, it was a little mean." They didn't seem that upset about it, though.
Yeah. Anyways,
Jamal Agnew, he's no Graham Glasgow. That's all I gotta say.
True. I was just talking to him in his Twitch chat today. We're gonna set up some Valorant sometime. Anyways, let's get back into the podcast. Let's finish this out and get Arif and Ryan on their way. And yeah, Salah did have his interview today, reportedly. I don't think the Lions have confirmed it yet, but it's gonna happen if it hasn't already. And we are back on First Bite, talking about George Paton, the Lions general manager candidate who was interviewed in person, reportedly, according to Ian Rappaport, on Thursday. We're here with Arif Hasan from The Athletic Minnesota to give us the background on Paton. I want to start with a question from our chat that I thought was interesting because you mentioned a couple Lions names and Jeff Davidson, and most notably Darrell Bevell in their connections there in Minnesota. So someone from our chat asked, would hiring Paton push the Lions more towards keeping Bevell or maybe Marvin Lewis rather than, I think that is Lewis? Did he have a Marvin Lewis background at any point?
Not as far as I know, but Zimmer has a very strong relationship with Marvin Lewis for obvious reasons, and
right,
that might impact things.
But yeah, do you think? I mean, you mentioned at the top how the Vikings have kind of been flexible in their philosophy depending on the head coach, and the Lions, they're running both searches concurrently and they don't necessarily have to match up. But do you think that given the way the Vikings have been run for the past decade and a half or so, that he might have his preference and want to keep someone like a familiar face around?
Maybe. So I think that the Vikings have one of the biggest problems with the Vikings is what one might uncharitably describe as nepotism. It's been very relationship driven in terms of the coaches that they tend to hire. Sometimes direct familial relationships, Adam Zimmer and Scott Turner and Clint Kubiak. And I think there's another coach's son that was on the staff pretty recently too. They've all been on the coaching staff, and then you take a look at who Mike Zimmer's hired. They're typically people that he's had a strong relationship with, or who has been in the league a long time that he's been able to develop a relationship with. You take a look back, the same thing happened with Leslie Frazier, which led to some truly awful hires, incidentally. The linebackers coach, Fred Pugic, as well as the linebackers coach, Mike Singletary, both working in the building as linebackers coaches at the same time, did not work out remarkably very well. And then Mike Singletary was demoted, but Frazier, it was Leslie Frazier's friend, so you didn't want to fire him, and so he just was a guy on the payroll that just kind of walked around the building and did nothing. That's a problem.
Yeah, and
I don't think it's one that the Lions should replicate. I don't think it is necessarily related to the front office. You take a look at the front office structure, and there doesn't seem to be that sort of thing. Obviously, we mentioned that George Paton has followed Rick Spielman around, but also, he's so highly regarded that it might just actually be genuinely meritocratic. And there's nothing wrong with surrounding yourself with people that you're familiar with, whose philosophy aligns with yours, so long as they're qualified for the position that they hold. And so long as you also give opportunities to other people. And it very much seems like the Vikings do that, at least in the front office. So I do think that relationships will probably help someone like Darrell Bevell, if he wants to, stay the offensive coordinator or something like that. But I don't think that it would drive the conversation. And then whoever the Lions hires the head coach is going to have the final say either way.
Right.
And so, if they're not impressed with Bevell, or if they've got their own ideas about who should be the offensive coordinator, they'll probably just bring that guy in. And I don't know that George Paton would necessarily go to bat for somebody kind of out of line. I think that, he'll say, I've worked with Bevell, here's what I know about him. He's a great guy, this, that, and the other thing. But I don't think that he would say, I really think that you should hire him. I think that would probably not be in keeping with what we've seen from the front office, or in keeping with what we typically see from general manager head coach relationships anyway. So it could mean something in that, if something is on the fence, I wouldn't be surprised if the information that Paton provides on a relationship with somebody that he has would help retain that person. But I don't think it would lead to something like, hey, I know that you've really got your eye on this, quarterbacks coach that you've worked with in the past that's ready to take the next step up. But I really think, he should wait a little bit, learn under a guy, as experienced as Bevell, probably keep Bevell on. I don't think he would do something like that.
Got it. But it is interesting you mentioned nepotism, because I feel like
but I think that's just who they've hired as head coaches.
Well, no, I'm using that as a segue though, because obviously the big the big connection here, and I think a lot of people are concerned that maybe this is the only reason he's a candidate, which I think you've kind of proven is probably not the case. But Chris Spielman is definitely in these meetings, definitely has a big influence on who this next general manager will be. And so, the brother of Rick Spielman,
right?
How close are they? Do you have any idea of how much?
The Spielmans are very close.
Yeah. So Chris must literally know George Paton like personally.
I would imagine that they've had each other over for dinner. Like I wouldn't think that this is unusual. This brings up the kind of the larger uncomfortable conversation about the lack of opportunities for particular people in football and the other opportunities that other people in football get. It is unsurprising that the relatives of coaches, and in particular coaches' sons, get a lot of opportunities. And in a lot of lenses, it's not necessarily inappropriate. They've grown up around the game. They have been mentored by usually their fathers or their other relatives. And they've got a lot of experience that a lot of other people don't have that would recommend them to the role. And so in some respects, it actually does make a lot of sense that you've got kind of this hermetically sealed bubble of who can be an NFL coach or who gets the most opportunities. And it totally makes sense to leverage your relationships to try and get the best people in the building. The concern is if you misevaluate other people that you don't have relationships with because of or in favor of those relationships. And it's already a problem that it's difficult to break into the coaching ranks. It's difficult to break into the FO ranks without those relationships. And so you need to kind of be open to that. The Vikings historically have been open to that on the front office side. If Paton gets in charge of hiring, he might have, landed on the radar because of the relationship that he has with the Spielmans. But I would not imagine that he would be comfortable kind of continuing that throughout the front office first. And then second, he's been a top tier sort of candidate. I don't want to say he's been the top candidate or whatever, but he's been an in-demand candidate for years and years and years now. And so, like before San Francisco hired John Lynch, he was a candidate there as well. And that at the time was a remarkably appealing spot to be in. So for him to be a candidate there, I think means a lot. He's been a candidate, I think, for the San Diego Chargers. He was a candidate for the New York Jets. He's a candidate for undisclosed other teams that I can't name. But he's been somebody that has been kind of I think he was no, I already mentioned the Jets. But he's been somebody that's been sought after for a long, long time for people that are not related to or even have a very strong relationship with Rick Spielman. He's just really well regarded for whatever reason. Again, I wish I knew more. He's just really well regarded in the circles that tend to recommend to owners who they might want to hire.
Well, he seems like a smart guy to me for rebuffing the Jets. I mean, let's
he nailed that, huh?
Yeah, I mean, he's
and the Chargers actually, honestly.
But he did take an interview with the Lions guys.
Maybe he's
all out the window. Arif, can we role play real quick?
I guess, why not? I don't have any D20s on me, but
All right, so you are George Paton. The talk, obviously he's had the interview with the Lions, but there's also news that the Broncos have submitted a request to meet with Paton too. And I read a Star Tribune article by is it Ben Gosling?
Ben Gosling,
Gosling, yeah, and he mentioned another little bit of maybe nepotism that might be at work, but in the Broncos, George Paton's nephew Rob is a scout, so I don't know how much that would play into potentially him being interested in the Broncos job. But if you are George Paton, which job seems more appealing to you, the Detroit Lions job or the Denver Broncos job?
That's tough. Honestly, it's tough. I don't want to be attached to the hip to Drew Lock. But
would you want to be attached to the hip to John Elway either?
Well, I mean, he said he was taking like a step back, right? He might not
theoretically
matter. I don't know. They've got a lot of young talent on offense that's going to be kind of exciting to see develop. If Jerry Jeudy gets some hands, Cortland Sutton's getting back from injury, you might just be in a perfect spot to just draft a quarterback and plug and play, and that would be kind of cool. The Lions receiving core is obviously pretty stellar. I've been on this podcast like 4 times and I'm like, I love the Lions receiving core. Maybe it's just because Marvin Jones always puts up a hundo on the Vikings, but
almost 200.
Yeah, almost 200. Just 19 yards away, man. Could have done it.
I mean, he technically did do it, but that's a different conversation. That's a different conversation.
Yeah, right. But was that the Troy Dye down the middle? Did they just Lions got hosed.
Yep.
Multiple calls. Tracy
right,
Walker roughing the passer.
The roughing the passer one, that was pretty bad too, huh?
Yeah.
It's a good thing it got you a better draft pick. I wouldn't complain too much.
True.
But
Thank you.
But yeah, I think that it's probably the Broncos because there's a little bit less you have to do defensively, and offensively, the Lions is a little bit better, but I really think that you at least get to sit somebody behind Stafford if Stafford isn't leaving this year, which sounds like it's a possibility. So who knows? But if you could convince Stafford to stay on another year or two, as you kind of continue to build that team around him, maybe you could sit someone. But I think you probably have a little bit more to do with the Lions. So to me, actually, the tiebreaker is just your perception of the team culture, honestly. And that one's tough too because of Elway. Normally I would just say, the Lions have this history. Their team culture is probably not that great. But hey, if they're serious about establishing the winning culture, and if Chris Spielman is turning things around, and all this other stuff, maybe that breaks it in favor of the Lions over the Broncos. But I think it's pretty tough, honestly. I might prefer to live in Denver, and I've been on this podcast a couple of times. I actually really like Detroit a lot. So it's not like shade on Detroit, but I might prefer to live in Denver. That might be a tiebreaker too. So yeah, honestly, who knows? It's probably just an evaluation that you make based off of your own interview with them.
I got one more for you, and I'm going to keep you in the role-playing mode here. I know you're a Seahawks fan. Let's pretend you're a Vikings fan for a second.
Jesus Christ. All the time. Can't escape this.
If the Lions were to hire George Paton, as a theoretical Vikings fan, how would that make you feel?
As a theoretical Vikings fan, I'd be sad. I mean, it seems like he's done a lot. Yeah. Again, we have to be pretty vague, right? It seems like he's important, right?
Right.
But my understanding is that he's been doing a lot for the Vikings, and whatever he's done seems to be positive. So I think that it would probably be a pretty big loss for the organization. I think the Vikings are anticipating that this is a possibility, which is why they recently promoted Jamal Stevenson, maybe to take on George Paton's role. I don't know, but I mean, it would probably suck. Again, I have to speak in probabilistic language. It would probably suck, and I would probably feel like the Vikings lost something. But materially, from where I'm sitting, I can't actually identify what that would be, so it's probably easier to take.
Fair. Ryan, you got one more before we get out of here?
No, this man is too handsome. We need to let him get back to being handsome off this podcast.
Are you talking about Jeremy? He's running the podcast. You can't let him go.
Quit it.
Appreciate
You're
that.
too modest.
Arif, let's give you a second and your handsome self to pip out your stuff. Where can people find you? If there's any, either Rick Spielman or George Paton related material that Lions fans might want to read, let's hear where it's at.
Well, sure. So you can find me over at The Athletic, theathletic.com/author/Arif-Hasan. If you go there and click on any of my stories and then subscribe to that, I get credit. Please keep me fed. I would very much enjoy that. But every year I do write a piece about the combine cutoffs that the Vikings seemingly use. I have to go back and look at their history and see, what the cutoffs are. But, historically, I've been able to find out, for example, that they value 100 inches in the broad jump a lot for offensive linemen. That's been pretty important. I've been able to figure out it looks like they value explosion a lot. For edge defenders, looks like they value 3-cone a lot for tackles and stuff like that. I looked at all of those, and I figured it out essentially for every position, and they've changed over the years. Like I said, you can find those over at The Athletic, what those positional cutoffs are, and that might track. I don't know. It might track going forward. Some of these positional cutoffs were determined by the internal Vikings analytics team. They actually hired an external data scientist to design the process by which that they would, kind of determine these things. And, who knows? I mean, there's all kinds of fraud in the data science industry. So, maybe they got snookered. I don't know. But I don't know. I just got to keep it real, right? But but it's something that they take seriously. So you can head over to The Athletic and try and find those pieces. I've also got a pair of podcasts that I'm on regularly as well. One is Norse Code, which is a little bit looser, more informal. Half the time, it's the one that Jeremy was on. It's so obviously it's the less important one.
Wow.
No, but half the time, like we talk about whatever team we're about to go up against, and that's the interview segment. And then the other half, I'm talking about like food or movies or whatever. So that one's pretty fun. And then also, I'm also on the Football Machine, which actually has a beat reporter that does actual journalism, unlike me. And so that one's a little bit more serious when it comes to talking about the Vikings. So you can find that both of those wherever you can find podcasts. If you want my bad political takes, let's go to the Wide Left podcast, which updates like once every couple of months. Who knows?
Well, there you go. Arif Hasan, one of our favorites, or at least used to be one of our favorites before that last punch in. Appreciate you joining us.
Man. Build you up, punch you down. It's fine. We're even. Yeah.
Even keel. All right, Arif, thanks for joining us, and thank you for listening, everybody. We will be back soon with another full podcast, probably Monday or Tuesday, and then another couple first bites in there as well, talking about more GM and head coaching candidates for the Lions. So stick with us. Until then, it's chaos. Be kind. Okay, we are still live, but let me take the recording guys out of here. That actually lasted the whole time. Good job. Good job, guys.
Is that why there's two recording guys?
Yep.
Is that one?
One is a backup one.
So there's Craig and then
Then
GR.
there's backwards Craig.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's
Backwards Craig, yeah.
Yeah.
Evil
GR.
Craig. Bizarre Craig.
Yeah.
Oh, now Ryan has disappeared to our Twitch audience. Sorry.
That's too bad.
Now he's got text.
The old John Cena treatment.
All right, he's just got text over him now. Oh, there you go.
So people that are watching, just so you're aware, in about an hour, we are going to have Joe Goodberry on here to talk about Marvin Lewis, Lions head coaching candidate. In fact, the first one
Joe, man.
that was
Great get.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. I've never really interacted with him much. We'll be talking about Marvin Lewis, the very first candidate that the Lions interviewed. We'll ask him if he thinks it's a serious interview or maybe they're just kind of getting information since they got a whole bunch of non-football people in that organization right now.
Since I won't be there, can you ask one question to him?
Absolutely.
Can you ask him to rank Marvin Lewis on a scale of 1 to Jim Caldwell?
I will ask that exact question.
Okay, thank you.
Ask him how much his 3D printing stuff runs him.
Well, I don't even know what that's about.
Well, you got to check out his he makes all kinds of nerdy stuff. It's so dope. He just made a white Power Ranger helmet. I don't know if that was 3D printed. He made a phenomenal sculpture of Tony Stark snapping the gauntlet, which spoilers for anyone who hasn't watched Endgame, I guess. But
you technically spoiled it for me, but I couldn't care less.
Right, yeah, but it's an absolutely stunning sculpture. And
That's
he does
cool.
all kinds of nerd stuff that I am absolutely in love with.
Cool.
Sorry, Troy.
He's joking. I don't know. I have no idea if he's joking or not.
I'll get like a threatening DM like 2 days from now. We'll see.
Arif, you piece of shit!
Okay, he is joking. Okay, well, I don't think there's any more questions. Someone asked if we hire George Paton, do we need to buy a 100-foot American flag?
Yeah.
Only if you mispronounce his last name.
Yeah.
Someone asked about his qualifications. As Arif kind of explained, we don't really know, but he's basically touched every kind of job.
His resume
is
is stacked.
He's basically done everything a GM needs to do except literally have the title of GM, it sounds like. So, and he's done it for what, 12 years just as the assistant GM? Or no,
13 years with the Vikings,
and 8 or 9
and
as
then
the assistant
9 years as the assistant GM.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you missed out on that, we're 50 minutes in. We talked a good 40 minutes. I'd say about 40 minutes of it we got Peyton talk in there.
I like by proxy, yeah.
Yeah.
We've been talking very much about Peyton himself.
Sure. Yes. Technically true. You did as good as I think anyone possibly could outside of maybe his wife.
Yeah, his wife probably would have nailed it. She booked her.
I mean, we tried. She didn't respond to our DMs, so.
Yeah, I guess in keeping with the tradition, yeah.
All right, guys, we're gonna end that here. We're gonna come back in an hour. Like I said, we're gonna talk. I almost said Jim Caldwell. Thanks for that, Ryan. Now I'm just gonna have those two locked in my head and be considered a racist. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it makes you racist.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Marvin Lewis, in an hour. So be sure to join us then. Until then, go get some dinner or something. Take a nap.